Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up New Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 15 July 2023. Topics for today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion. The first topic of today's discussion is based on this news article which featured on page number 6 of The Hindu newspaper. This article dwells upon the various factors which has resulted into the recent split in the NCP in the state of Maharashtra. Now this split has created a similar situation which was created by the split of Shiv Sena. Now both the factions of NCP are claiming that they are the real parties, and this splinter group has sided with the ruling coalition of Shiv Sena and BJP. Now, if you will refer to the GS paper 2 syllabus, Parliament and state legislatures, structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers, privileges, and issues arising out of these have been mentioned. Now, the local factors and political ambitions which have been discussed in this news article are not that relevant from the perspective of UPSC examination. However, issue of defection and a very important law, that is anti-defection law, which has been inserted in the 10th schedule of the Constitution of India, are pretty much important from the perspective of UPSC examination. As you can see here, UPSC has been persistently asking questions based on defection and its effects. As in 2013, it has asked a question that the role of individual MPs has diminished over the years, and as a result, healthy constructive debates on policy issues are not usually witnessed. How far can this be attributed to the anti-defection law, which was legislated but with a different intention? Similarly, UPSC in 2017 asked another question, that is individual parliamentarian role as the national lawmaker is on a decline, which in turn has adversely impacted the quality of debates and their outcome. Furthermore, if you will look at the preliminary examination of 2022, UPSC again asked a question based on anti-defection law, in which you had to find the correct statements. Statement 1 says the law specifies that a nominated legislator cannot join any political party within 6 months of being appointed to the House. Statement 2 says the law does not provide any time frame within which the presiding officer has to decide a defection case. Now we will be covering different aspects related to defection and anti-defection law, and thus you will be able to attempt these questions comfortably. So let's begin our discussion. So let us start our discussion with the understanding of the term defection. Now in crude terms, the term defection relates to the desertion of a group or a country. Now for the Indian political scenario, take an example. Suppose that a person A got elected to a house on the ticket of party X. Now, in order to get elected to the house, there are two factors which are at work. First is the credibility or credential of the individual plus alignment of the voter to the ideology of party X. Now, if this person A, after getting elected, decides to join a party Y. Now, in this case, the ideological prospect of the voter, that is, the ideology on the basis of which voter has voted for the representative, is gone. Now, defection cannot be termed as immoral in all the cases. If the defection has been done due to loss in faith of the ideology of the current political party. However, in most of the cases, defection has been done for the political ambitions and better political prospects. Now, practice of defection is not new to the Indian polity. It was in the decade of late 1960s and 70s where the practice of defection became a rampant one. Particularly in 1967, when there was an independent MLA of Haryana named Gayalal changed the political parties for 3 times within 15 days, thus giving birth to a famous phrase that is Ayaram Gayaram. Now, such defections started affecting the continuity and stability of various state governments as well as central government. However, in order to address these issues, the 10th schedule was inserted in the constitution in the year 1985 through the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and we commonly know this law as an anti-defection law. This amendment also amended Article 101, 102, 190 and 191 of the Constitution, which dealt with the vacation of seats and disqualification from the membership of Parliament and the state legislature. It lays down the process by which legislators may be disqualified on grounds of defection by the presiding officer of the House. So thus in case of Lok Sabha, it is a speaker, and in case of Rajya Sabha, it is the vice president or the chairman. And same is the case with the state legislatures. So the 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which was added through 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act, mainly deals with the disqualification of the members of House on the grounds of defection. You can broadly categorize these disqualification in 3 heads. One is for the representatives who are members of any political party. Other one is for those who are independent, that is, they are elected without being set up as a candidate by any political party. And third category is nominated members. So ground for disqualification of a member of a political party is, there are two grounds on the basis of which members of a political parties can be disqualified. First is if a member voluntarily gives up his membership of the party. Now, voluntarily doesn't mean that he or she must resign. Even their actions can be termed as Now, term voluntarily doesn't mean that they have to resign. Even their actions and stands, if they are against the line of the political party, they are considered as they can be considered as Now there are two grounds on the basis of which members of political parties can be disqualified. First is if they voluntarily gives up the membership of the party. Now the Supreme Court has interpreted different provisions of the law, and in line with that, the phrase voluntarily giving up membership has a wider connotation than the resignation. The Supreme Court has interpreted that in the absence of a formal resignation by the member, the giving up of membership can be inferred by his conduct also. So, in other words, if members who have publicly expressed opposition to their party or support for another party are deemed to have resigned without actually resigning. So, a formal resignation is not required. The second ground is if a member votes or abstains from voting in such house contrary to any direction issued by his political party without obtaining prior permission of such party, and such act has not been condoned by the party within 15 days. An independent member of a house becomes disqualified to remain a member of the house if he joins any political party after such election. Whereas a nominated member of a house becomes disqualified for being a member of the house if he joins any political party after the expiry of 6 months from the date on which he takes his seat in the house. So from this provision, it is clear that member elected on a party ticket should continue in the party and obey the party direction. While for independent member, the condition for disqualification is different from that of nominated member. A nominated member can join a political party within 6 months of his nomination. An independent member stands disqualified even if he joins any political party at any point of time. Now, as we know that presiding officer, that is a speaker and chairman, are the deciding authority in the cases of anti-defection. Now, initially there was a provision that their decision was deemed as final and cannot be challenged in court of law. However, things changed with the Quixote Holohan case of 1992. The initial provision that the decision of presiding officer is immune from judicial review was struck down in Quixote case, thereby allowing appeals against the presiding officer's decision in the High Court and Supreme Court. However, Supreme Court held that there may not be any judicial intervention until the presiding officer gives his order. So after presiding officer has given his decision on the question of disqualification, only then Supreme Court or High Court can intervene, not before that. So the next pertinent question that we must look upon is, are there any exceptions to this rule? Answer is yes. First condition is case of mergers. A legislator can change their party without the risk of disqualification. The law allows a party to merge with or into another party provided that at least 2/3 of its legislators are in favor of the merger. In such a scenario, neither the members who decide to merge nor the ones who stay with the original party will face disqualification. Now here, try to understand the present situation. Here experts say that the split in Maharashtra in NCP is not a merger but a split. So members should be disqualified. Same was the case with the Shiv Sena split, for which both the factions of Shiv Sena reached out to the Supreme Court. Now another exception is voluntarily giving up membership if a member is being elected as the presiding officer of the house. He gives up the membership of his party and rejoins it after he ceases to hold that office. And this exemption has been provided in view of the dignity and impartiality of this office. Now there is one point that one should keep in mind, that initially the exemption was provided for the split if 1/3 of the members decided to split the party. However, this provision was deleted by the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act of 2003. That means defectors have no more protection on ground of split, but on the ground of merger. Now, intended advantage or the benefit of this act has not been fully realized. As you will understand with this discussion, that the first aim was to gain the political stability. The law plays a crucial role in promoting stability within the political system by curbing the frequent switching of political parties by the legislators. It was intended to prevent opportunistic defections and ensures that elected representatives remain committed to the party they were elected under, thereby reducing the likelihood of sudden shifts in the government policies. However, recent episodes in the state of Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana are contrary to this intention. Second aim was curbing of corruption and non-developmental expenditure. By discouraging defection, the anti-defection law helped to reduce corruption at the political level. It discourages the practice of horse trading and offers a safeguard against politicians being swayed away by monetary or other undue influences. Moreover, the law also contributes to saving non-developmental expenditure associated with frequent by-elections that would otherwise be required due to frequent defections. Another intended aim of this law was democratic realignment. That means it facilitated the democratic realignment of political parties within the legislature through the process of party merger. It allows parties with similar ideologies and goals to come together, thereby promoting a more coherent and effective legislative agenda. So you have seen that intended benefits or the aims have not been realized through this law. So what kind of challenges does it poses to the Indian democratic system? The first is it fails to differentiate between dissent and defection. The anti-defection law seeks to provide a stable government by ensuring the legislators do not switch sides. However, this law also restricts a legislator from voting in line with his conscience, judgment, and interests of his electorate. Such situation impedes the oversight function of the legislator over the government, that is executive. Because through questions and debates, a legislator decides or questions the policy of the executive. But in order to remain in the line of the political party or the ruling party, one has to vote in the sync of the ideology of the or the direction of the party. So the accountability of the executive gets impeded. Another challenge is the frequent and rampant defections, as we have seen recently in the state of Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and many northeastern states. Thus, the anti-defection law and its provisions have failed to deliver the intended results and have failed to prove as a deterrent to the defectors. Another challenge lies in the subjective interpretation of various provisions, as is the case with the voluntarily giving up the membership of the party. As we have already discussed that how Supreme Court has given a wider connotation to the term voluntarily giving up the membership, and it also includes the condition where member has publicly expressed opposition to their party or support for another party and it has been deemed as to have resigned. Another issue is related to partition role of the speaker. Generally, a speaker enjoys the office with the support of the majority party. So in order to appease that party or to hold their position, they often act in an irrational and impartial manner. There have been several cases where the courts have expressed concern about the unnecessary delay in deciding such petitions. In some cases, this delay in decision making has resulted in members who have defected from their parties continuing to be member of the House. There are instances where speakers have deliberately waited for number to swell up to 2/3 of the total number of members of the party, as was the case in Telangana, where MLAs broken away in small groups gradually to join the ruling party. And when two-thirds of the opposition defected to the ruling party, Speaker gave his verdict and decided not to disqualify those MLAs, saying that two-thirds of them have defected. Now, another challenge lies with the law itself, in which many experts believe that there is an erroneous and illogical distinction between the condition of disqualification of independent and nominated member. If you can recall, a nominated member can join a political party within 6 months. However, in case of independent member, he will stand disqualified if he or she will join any political party at any point of time. An expert find this distinction illogical. Further, law also discriminate or makes an illogical distinction between individual defection and group defection. When it allows two-thirds of the member to defect and merge, it does not allow individuals to defect from the party. So what is the way ahead? Several experts have suggested that the law should be valid only for those votes that determine the stability of the government. For example, annual budget and confidence motion. Supreme Court in various judgments have opined that there should be a permanent tribunal headed by a retired Supreme Court judge or retired Chief Justice of the High Court. Further, various expert committees have opined that President and Governor should be the deciding authority in consultation with the Election Commission. Now, last but not the least, there should be a fixed time frame in which presiding officer must decide upon the question of the disqualification. So the next topic of today's discussion is based on this news which featured on page number 4 of the Hindu newspaper. Now there is a proposal for a new rail corridor in the state of Kerala. Now as per the experts, this new rail corridor has been proposed between the city of Thiruvananthapuram and Kannur. Now as per the expert, this semi-high speed rail corridor will enable an average speed of 125 km per hour for the trains, and through which they will be able to cover a distance of 420 km in 3.5 hour time. Now this particular project is not that important from the perspective of UPSC examination, however infrastructure sector is. If you will refer to the General Studies paper 3, infrastructure sector, under which energy, ports, roads, airports and railways have been mentioned. Now referring to the previous year UPSC questions, you will find that it has asked a question based on infrastructure sector several times. As in 2014, it has asked a question, explain how private-public partnership, that is PPP agreements in longer gestation infrastructure projects can transfer unsuitable liabilities to the future. Further, it says what arrangements need to be put in place to ensure that successive generations' capacities are not compromised. Additionally, in 2017, UPSC has asked a question that examine the developments of airports in India through joint venture under public-private partnership, that is PPP model. And what are the challenges faced by the authorities in this regard? So in line with the tradition of UPSC mains questions, we will be covering railway sector in this discussion. We will be looking at the challenges facing the railway sector, the solution, what is the need for public-private partnership. We will also look into why there is a poor response from the private sector towards these offerings, and in the end, we will look into the way forward based on various recommendations of the committees. So let's begin the discussion. Now, India has the 4th largest railway network in the world. It has come a long way since 1950 in terms of number of trains and quantum of traffic carried. However, it has been highlighted that Indian railways may end up as burden on the national economy due to the number of issues. So first we will look into the challenges facing the Indian Railway. Now the first challenge is decline in share of freight traffic. Now, this decline in share of freight traffic is on account of shortfall in carrying capacity and lack of price competitiveness. Indian Railways has kept the passenger fares at lower value while it has increased the freight charges to compensate for this loss. Hence, the cross subsidization, that is, increasing the freight rates while keeping low the passenger fare, has led to shift in favor of road transport for both freight as well as short distance passenger traffic. Now, another challenge is underinvestment. The expenditure on railways as percentage of transport expenditure declined from 56% in 1985 to 1990, that is 5-year duration, to 30% in 2007 to 2012, that is 5-year duration. This underinvestment has resulted into poor quality of service and infrastructure both. Now, another challenge is organizational structure. Delays in decision making, inadequate market orientation led to slow turnover times and delays in the implementation of the railway projects. Now, these delays have resulted into rising cost of projects as well as has resulted into creating a demand supply match. Now, another issue is internal generation of resources. Now, these resources we are talking in terms of revenues. Now, static and low passenger fare has resulted into lower revenues, while artificially kept high freight rates have resulted into shift in favor of road transport. So, in terms of revenues, both these strategies are of no use, and this ends up in lower level of internal generation of resources. Now, this issue of underinvestment and low level of internal resources have culminated into safety and poor quality of service, which often keeps a large chunk of population away from using railways. Those who are capable of paying high fares prefer airlines over the railways. And considering the latest trends and considering the development of national highways, people are preferring roads even more than the railways. Last but not the least, high operating cost is another challenge of railway. Now, what does it mean? In simple terms, it is the amount of money that one spends while earning rupees 100. So, lower the operating cost, higher would be the profit. But it is not true in the case of railways, at it ends up spending around 98.4% to earn rupees 100, which leaves a meager amount as a revenue for railways. So, in other words, it is kind of a virtuous cycle in which political interference in the working of railways results into lower passenger fares and higher freight charges, that is cross subsidization, which in turn results into higher operating ratio model, which shifts in transports of goods from railways to highways because of high freight charges of railways. Now, this impacts the revenue and results into poor financial position, low investment in new capacity addition, and which ultimately results into poor maintenance and lack of world-class amenities for passengers. Now, let us understand how to address these problems. Now, Vivek Debroy on railway modernization and Anil Kakodkar committee on improving railway safety have given a number of recommendations to improve the performance and safety of Indian railways. The first suggestion is rationalization of fare structure and subsidies. By ending cross subsidization, that is higher freight charges and lower passenger fare, which is presently followed by railways. They also suggest that freight traffic should be competitive with the cost of road transportation so that there is an increase in the modal share of the railway. Now, another suggestion is independent regulator to determine the tariff and to determine whether this tariff is market determined and competitive. Now, some measures have been taken in this direction, as government has approved an independent regulator for railways in the year 2018. However, nothing concrete has been done so far. Another suggestion is focus on core activities of running trains and give up non-core activities such as running schools and hospitals, etc. Another suggestion is accounting reforms. Now, the current accounting system does not provide details of the cost of various activities and services, such as introduction of new trains and scheduling of the stop. It neither tracks assets nor assesses liabilities. Consequently, it becomes difficult to compute the cost and benefit of any project or activity. Hence, in this regard, there is need to adopt accounting reform to track these details. Now, another suggestion is related to financing of projects, for which railways can lease huge amount of land that it holds to the private sector for certain duration of time and earn revenue. Similarly, railways can enter into PPP agreement for the development of stations. Now recently government is working on this aspect. As you might have heard that recently Rani Kamlapati railway station, which was previously known as the Habibganj railway station, has been turned into India's first privately owned railway station. And railway is also giving its station spaces for development of malls and shops. So this is a step in a right direction. Now lastly, Kakodkar committee had recommended for an investment of rupees 1 lakh crore over a period of 5 years to improve the safety of Indian railways. So these are some recommendations as given by Vivek Debroy committee and Anil Kakodkar committee, but one important aspect that we must look into in detail is the PPP agreement. So first we must look into the need for PPP, that is public-private partnership. Now first reason for the need of PPP is the demand exceeding the capacity. Now, according to data, around 5 crore, that is 15% of passengers could not be given confirmed ticket in the year 2019 and 20. On certain routes, the demand exceeds the train capacity by 30%. So this reason calls for a participation of private sector in the operations of railway also in terms of running private trains. Now some development in shape of IRCTC Tejas train has been done by recent government. But IRCTC itself is a government undertaking, not a private company in a true sense. You may say that this step is just on a trial version. Now another reason that demands for need of PPT is availability of track capacity. Now as you know, 2 dedicated freight corridors have been commissioned. And this will generate additional capacity on routes adjacent to the DFCs, where more passenger trains can be run. So there is a scope for inclusion of private sector in the operations of railways. Now public-private partnership will also solve the need of higher investment in Indian railways. As in PPP enables Indian Railways to raise revenue to meet its investment needs of around 50 lakh crore between 2018 and 2030. Now Indian Railway has a strong forward-backward linkages, and due to which it has a large multiplier effect of 5. That means investment of rupees 1 which will result into the output of rupees 5. And it has been highlighted by the economic survey of 2014-15. Now lastly, PPP model will ensure benefits to the passengers. And how? With higher service quality and reduced journey time through the introduction of next generation coaches. Now we must look into the working of PPP model. And we will discuss this under 2 heads. First is how the sharing of resources will be done. And second is what would be the payment. Now under this model, physical infrastructure like signals, tracks, stations, etc. would remain under the control of Indian Railway. The private sector entities would be required to bring in their modern coaches to operate on specific routes. Here the private sector entities are expected to be given complete autonomy with respect to fixing of fares and provisions of other services such as catering, housekeeping, etc. Now for the payment mechanism, the private sector is required to pay haulage charges to the railways for the use of its physical infrastructure. Apart from that, the private sector operator needs to share the revenue with the Indian Railway. One thing that should come into your mind, that if there are recommendation of PPP model and there are benefits associated with it, what are the reasons that cause poor response of the private sector? Now, first reason is higher entry barriers. Now, private entities required to buy their own fully air-conditioned modern coaches, which are highly costly. Another challenge lies in higher charges. Private entities are required to pay multiple charges to the Indian Railways in form of haulage charges, station usage charges, etc. Plus, they are also required to share certain percentage of their revenue with the Indian Railway. Now, private entities argue that the higher charges reduce their profit margin. Now, another reason is lack of level playing field. Now, trains runs by Indian Railways and private sector would operate on same routes. Presently, there is lack of clarity with respect to whether there would be level playing field between Indian Railway and private sector or not. For example, IR trains may get priority in terms of allotment of platforms, preferential departure and arrival timings, etc. And this confusion keeps private sector away from investing into railway. Another reason is unfair competition. Now, Indian Railways maintains lower passenger fares through cross subsidization. Similarly, the subsidy provided on certain air routes under the UDAN scheme has led to decline in airfare prices. On the other hand, the private sector operating the passenger train needs to fix higher fares to recover the investment. The higher fares on such private trains vis-a-vis Indian Railway trains acts as a major obstacle in the participation of private sector in operation of railways. Now, another important reason is unreasonable terms in the PPP model as suggested by the government. First is lack of flexibility for the private entities in changing departure and arrival timings, introduction of new halts along the routes, deciding on length of the train, etc. Now, another issue is penalty. Now, PPP agreement provides for key performance indicators such as punctuality, reliability, maintenance of train, etc. to be met by private entities. Inability to meet these indicators will attract a penalty. Now, for example, if the private trains do not depart on time, they would be required to pay a fine. However, the private entities argue that the ability to arrive and depart on time depends on the signaling provided by the Indian Railways. So, it would be unfair to force the private entities to pay fines in such cases. Now, having discussed various aspects related to Indian Railways, let us discuss the way forward. The Bibek Debroy Committee on Railway Modernization had strongly advocated setting up of Railway Regulatory Authority of India to ensure success of PPP in Indian Railways. And as we have discussed earlier, that government has given in principle approval of such authority in the year 2018, but nothing concrete has been done yet. The rationale behind setting up of such regulatory authority lies in the fact that presently policy making and the regulatory function are both vested with the Ministry of Railways. Now, there is a clear conflict of interest, as the regulator, that is Ministry of Railway, is also the competitor of the private entity. Because of this, private entities would always have an apprehension that policies would be titled in the favor of Indian Railways. An atmosphere of trust and confidence must be built through setting up of an independent and autonomous regulator in the form of RRAI. Now, unlike other infrastructure sectors such as road, ports and airports, Indian Railway has so far failed to attract large private sector investment. Hence, going forward, Indian Railway must address various bottlenecks and challenges which are hindering the private sector investment. So the next topic of today's discussion is based on this news which featured on page number 4 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, as per the news, there is another tussle which is in making between the Jharkhand governor and the elected government of Jharkhand. Now, newly appointed governor of Jharkhand, Mr. C.P. Radhakrishnan, has set his sight on taking over the Tribes Advisory Council of the state. Now, Tribes Advisory Council of the state is constituted under the 5th schedule of the Constitution for the welfare of scheduled tribes. And at present, the Chief Minister is its ex officio head. Now, the matter of control over Tribes Advisory Council was the very reason of the tussle between previous governor of Rajasthan and the elected Hemant Soren government. As previous governor has accused the elected government that it has not followed the spirit of the 5th schedule by notifying the TAC rules, which was done without the consultation of the governor's office. Now, if you will refer to General Studies Paper 2 syllabus, issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure is mentioned there. And being an agent of the center, a confrontation between governor and elected government is always a challenge to the federal structure and its functioning. Furthermore, your syllabus mentions parliament and state legislatures, structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers and privileges. And governor being important part of this setup is pretty much important from the UPSC perspective. In addition to that, organization and functioning of the executive and judiciary is also mentioned. So governor being the constitutional head of the state governments becomes an important part of Indian democratic setup. Further, any confrontation between the elected government and the governor cannot be considered healthy for the democratic setup of the country. Now, Office of Governor, provisions related to it and news related to it has been a recurring theme in UPSC examination, both in preliminary as well as mains examination. As you can see here, it has asked a question in 2018 based on the features related to the Office of Governor. As in 2019, it has asked which of the following committee has suggested that governor should be an eminent person from outside the state and should be a detached figure without intense political links or should not have taken part in politics in recent past. Now try to attempt these two questions and let us know your answers in the comment box given below. Apart from preliminary examination, UPSC has also been asking questions based on governor and lieutenant governor in mains examination. As in 2018, it has asked that whether the Supreme Court judgment, which came in July 2018, can settle the political tussle between the lieutenant governor and elected government of Delhi. You had to examine this statement. So here in this discussion, we will be looking at the evolution of the Office of Governor, debate related to various provisions of the Office of Governor in the Constituent Assembly, the contemporary issues related to the Office of Governor, the recommendations or suggestions of the various committees, and various Supreme Court judgments which have been delivered in this regard. So let us begin our discussion. So as we know that Article 153 to Article 162 of the Indian Constitution deals with the various provisions related to the Office of Governor. But let us quickly look into the evolution of the post of Governor. Now since 1858, when India was administered by the British Crown, provincial governors were agents of the Crown, functioning under the supervision of the Governor General. Now, with the coming of the Government of India Act of 1935, the Governor was now to act in accordance with the advice of ministers of the province's legislature. But it retained special responsibility and various discretionary power. Now, upon independence, when the Provisional Constitution of 1947 was adopted, it was an adapted version of the Government of India Act of 1935. Now, here the office of Governor was retained, but the phrases like in his discretion, acting in his discretion, and exercising his individual judgment were omitted. But things doesn't stop there. The Constituent Assembly debated in length the provisions related to the Office of Governor. These debates were centered around three major points: whether the office should be nominated or elected. Discussion were regarding the discretionary powers that have been given to the governor, and Article 167, which empowers the governor to ask the chief minister to furnish any information regarding the administration of the affairs of the state and proposals for legislation. Now let us take them one by one. Now, as you know, Article 154 and 155 of Indian Constitution says that governor is to be nominated by the president as the executive head of the state. Members had questioned whether a nominated governor could be impartial or not, to which Jawaharlal Nehru proposed that the governor nominated as such could be a detached figure who could rise above party politics. As to where he should be elected or nominated, Constituent Assembly had an opinion that both the office of CM, who is elected by the people, and the elected governor can create a situation of friction between the two. Another argument was given that if the post is ornamental, why to waste resources and time in such a huge election? Now, multiple members of the assembly raised concern about the discretion clause. Members argued that how can we call a position a mere symbol if any person has the right to act in his discretion? To which Dr. Ambedkar contended that the vesting the governor with certain discretionary power was in no sense contrary to or in no sense a negation of the responsible government. He said that the phrase except in so far as he is by or under this constitution required to exercise meant that the discretion was very limited clause. So as you have seen, various terms like in his discretion were omitted. This phrase was added to limit the discretionary power of the governor. Now, member also raised doubts about Article 167. As you know, it empowers the governor to ask the chief minister to furnish any information regarding the administration of the affairs of the state and proposals for legislation. To counter this argument, Dr. Ambedkar said that this notion was completely mistaken, as the article nowhere said that the governor could overrule the ministry. He also added that if the governor's limited duties of advising and warning ministries was also taken away, then he would be rendered a completely unnecessary functionary. So keep these facts in your mind. As the topic of the debate in Constituent Assembly has become cause for recent or contemporary issues related to the office of governor. As you know, the discretionary power, the appointment and removal, as well as functioning of the office of governor has been bone of contention between various state governments and the governor, and for a larger understanding between the center and the state governments. So let us look into the contemporary issues related to the office of governor. Now, the root cause of problem lies in the fact that governors have become political appointees. As Article 155 of the Constitution, which talks about appointment of the governor, says that the governor of a state shall be appointed by the president by warrant under his hand and seal. The eligibility criteria includes that age should be more than 35 years. He should be an Indian citizen, that is, nationality should be Indian. He should not be member of any house of the parliament or any house of the state legislature. In addition to that, he should not hold the office of prophet. So these are the criteria which are taken into consideration while choosing a governor for a state. Now, as you can recall, that Jawaharlal Nehru proposed that the governor should be a detached figure. Now, on several instances, former politicians, judges, and bureaucrats with certain political leaning have been appointed as governor of the state. Now, this goes against the very argument of the politically detached figure as was argued in the Constituent Assembly. Constitutional experts say that the CM is answerable to the people, but the governor is answerable to no one except the center. Now, second issue is related to the discretionary power. And to understand this, let us look into the constitutional text. Now, you have seen that this phrase has been added. But still it says the governor in the exercise of his functions can use his discretion. The conspicuous thing is, if any questions arises whether any matter is or is not a matter as respects which the governor is by or under this constitution required to act in his discretion, the decision of the governor in his discretion shall be final. So, what surmounts to his discretion, he is the one who will decide whether it is his discretion or not. Furthermore, it says that the validity of anything done by governor shall not be called in question on the ground that he ought or ought not to have acted in his discretion. Now, while Constitution provides for the binding aid and advice of the Council of Ministers in case of the President, it gives a big scope for governor to act in his discretion, and he is the one who will decide whether it is his discretion or not. Now, subclause 3 says the question whether any and if so what advice was tendered by minister to the governor shall not be inquired into any court. Now, using this discretionary power and the vague definition of it creates the problem. As in Article 164, subclause 1, powers to invite the leader of the largest party or alliance post-election to form the government has often been misused to favor a particular political party. For example, in 2017, Governor of Goa and Manipur did not invite the largest party to form the government. Now, governor uses his discretion in matters of appointment to various posts of state. Now, as you have seen that there shall be a council of minister for aid and advice of governor. However, governor has circumvented these advice and appointed several dignitaries at several occasions, as is the case with the Tamil Nadu government, who appointed VCs of various universities without the concurrence or adhering to the advice tendered by the Council of Ministers. Now, this discretionary power again creates interference in day-to-day administration and agenda of the government, which also relates to the power to give assent and reservation of bill for the president as enshrined in Article 200 and Article 201. Now, if you can recall the latest tussle between the Tamil Nadu governor and the government in relation to the NEET reservation bill, in which first governor used his pocket veto for an indefinite term and then reserved it for the president. So these are the various issues and contemporary instances where the discretionary powers of the governor has been misused. Now, next issue is related to precedent rule. As you know, under Article 356, governor provides a report to the president in case of failure of constitutional machinery in the states. Now, this is one of the most misused clause, as was seen in 2016 when Governor of Arunachal Pradesh recommended for precedent rule without giving chance to government to prove majority on the floor of the House. Now, another issue is the tag of the rubber stamp. As an appointee of the central government, office of governor is said to be acting just to appease the political masters of the center. Now, on this side of the argument, various state governments have accused the governor to act on the behest of the central government. While on the flip side, various rulings of Supreme Courts have limited, or you may say curtailed, the scope of the office of governor, which again has made it a ornamental figure or a rubber stamp. Lastly, there is a criticism of the removal procedure of the governor. Now, as you know, governor serves under the pleasure of the president, which practically means that the governor serves under the pleasure of Prime Minister and his cabinet. If this pleasure is withdrawn before completion of 5-year term, the governor has to step down. As the president works on the aid and advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, in effect, the governor can be appointed and removed by the central government. While the Constitution defines the governor's duties and responsibilities, there is no provision for impeaching the governor. Indian Constitution is silent on removal of governor. So you might have heard about the mass resignation of the governors of various states when there is change in guard at the center. So now you can reconnect it with the debate of the Constituent Assembly. The debate was on the issue of whether he should be elected or nominated is still persistent, as the appointment of governor is a contentious issue. Debate related to the discretionary power is still the biggest bone of contention between the state governments and the office of governor. While misuse of precedent rule and the debate related to ornamental figure and whether there is a need to have one or not is still relevant. Having seen the issues related to the office of governor, let us look into what several Supreme Court judgments has to say about this. Now, one of the most significant case in this regard is S.R. Bommai versus Union of India 1994. In this case, Supreme Court held explicitly that in situations where there is a hung assembly, where no political party has obtained a clear majority of seats, the final decision rests not with the various feuding parties but with the concerned legislature through a floor test. Supreme Court also said that the failure of constitutional machinery means virtual impossibility and not just difficulties in carrying out governance in a state. That means you cannot dismiss a state government on the pretext that it is being difficult to carry out the governance of a state. There should be a complete failure of constitutional machinery. This case also allows the Supreme Court to investigate the reasons which forms the basis of governor's report in relation to the exercise of functions under Article 356, that is, Precedent Rule. Another case is BP Singhal versus Union of India, which happened in 2010. A 5-judge bench of Supreme Court on removal of governors mentioned about the dual role of governor. First is he is an agent of the state and second is he is constitutional head of the state. So governor has two vital roles. First is he acts as a link between center and state and another is he is constitutional head of the state. Supreme Court further held that governor is neither an employee of the union government nor the agent of the party in power, nor required to act under the dictates of political parties. Supreme Court also elaborated on the doctrine of pleasure as it upheld that no limitations or restrictions are placed on the pleasure doctrine, but that does not dispense with the need for a cause for withdrawal of that pleasure. That means you should provide reasons for withdrawal of the pleasure of the president. The court further held that the power of president to remove governor can't be exercised in an arbitrary, capricious or unreasonable manner. The power will have to be exercised in rare and exceptional circumstances for valid and compelling reasons. The latest judgment came in Nabam Rabia judgment, which was related to the precedent rule in Arunachal Pradesh. In this, Supreme Court held that governor's power of discretion as enshrined under Article 163 is limited and it must be based on reason. This exercise of power should not be arbitrary and fanciful. So question arises, what should be done then? First thing is need for politically neutral governor. Sarkaria Commission on Center-State Relation and the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, that is NCRWC, as well as Panchi Commission has reiterated the need for politically neutral governor. Panchi Commission in 2007 provided various recommendations. It says that there should be a clear guideline for the appointment of Chief Minister, so that there was some sort of regulation on the discretionary power of the governor. It said that a pre-poll alliance must be treated as one political party and let down the order of precedence that governor must follow in case of hung house. And that order of precedence is: first, priority should be given to a group with the largest pre-poll alliance commanding the largest number. Second should be the single largest party with support of others. Third should be post-electoral coalition with all parties joining the government. And last priority should be given to the post-electoral alliance with some parties joining the government and the remaining, including independents, supporting from outside. Sarkaria Commission also provides various suggestions in this regard. It recommended that governors should not be sacked before completing their 5-year tenure, except in rare and compelling circumstances. Recommendations have also made for provision to impeach the governor by the assembly. As you know, there is no procedure in the constitution related to the impeachment of the governor. However, none of these have been implemented yet. On the matter of appointment of governor, the commission felt that chief minister should be consulted for a smooth functioning and better relationship between the two in the matters of appointment of governor. Now, there are various other committees which have provided their recommendation with regard to the office of governor and center-state relation. The report of First Administrative Reform Commission in 1969 recommended that chief minister should be consulted before governor is appointed, as was reiterated in Sarkaria Commission. The Rajamannar Committee of 1971 recommended the omission of Article 356 and 357 altogether, while Justice V. Chelayya Commission in 2002 recommended that Article 356 should be used sparingly, only in rarest of rare case. The NCRWC suggested that governors should be appointed through a committee comprising the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, Speaker of Lok Sabha, and the Chief Minister of the concerned state. So to conclude, we may say that there is need to follow the recommendations of Sarkaria and Punchi and various other commissions by drafting suitable rules and procedures for the functions of the governor. The role and functions assigned to the governor during independence served a different purpose. After 70 years of independence, the condition and polity of the country has changed. So there is need to revisit the role, function and discretionary power provided to the governor in the present circumstances. The last topic of today's discussion comes from this news which featured on page number 4 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, several events have been scheduled to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, who was the final ruler of Awadh, who possessed a remarkable appreciation for the arts and various art forms. These activities comprise an exhibition, heritage walk, and informative discussions. Now, as you know, GS Paper 1 mentions Indian culture and salient aspect of art forms, literature, architecture from ancient to modern times. It specifically mentions significant events and personalities. Furthermore, in 2016 itself, UPSC has asked question based on the contributions of the Krishna Deva Raya. So in this discussion, we will be focusing upon the contribution of the Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, the last ruler of the Awadh. So let us begin our discussion by having some basic facts related to Nawab Wajid Ali Shah. He was the final ruler of the Awadh who held the position from 1847 to 1856. His second wife, Begum Hazrat Mahal, played a significant role in the Indian Rebellion of 1857 against the British East India Company, acting as the regent of Awadh. Although his kingdom had been safeguarded by the East India Company under a treaty, it was annexed by the company in the year 1856. Wajid Ali Shah became the ruler of Awadh when the East India Company was determined to annex the prosperous kingdom which was regarded as the garden, granary and queen province of India. Upon ascending the throne, he actively participated in the administration of justice, implemented reforms and reorganized the military. The British resident of Lucknow, General William Sleeman, submitted a report highlighting alleged maladministration and lawlessness in Awadh. This report conveniently provided the British with the justification that they needed for the annexation under the doctrine of lapse, as propounded by the Governor General Lord Dalhousie. What is more important from the perspective of UPSC examination, that he was a great patron of the music, arts and culture. As a patron of music, the Nawab honored Bahadur Hussain Khan, who was one of Wajid Ali Shah's favorite musician, with the title of Zia-ud-Dawla. He himself adopted a pseudonym Akhtar Priya for his musical compositions. Under this name, he wrote poems, prose and thumris. His collections Diwan-e-Akhtar and Husn-e-Akhtar contains his ghazals. Much of the knowledge about music in Nawabi Lucknow comes from the text Madanul Musiki. that is the mine of music. There is a popular belief that Wajid Ali Shah was the creator of the light classical form known as Thumri. Wajid Ali Shah's innovative ideas and experiments in ghazals played a significant role in the shaping of the modern day style of the ghazals. Further, he was also patron of the dance. Kathak, which is a classical dance in India, used to be part of temple rituals in ancient times. It was under the artistic guidance and patronage of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah Kathak reached new heights. During this period, Kathak was also extensively performed by courtesans who developed the art form alongside its refinement in the court. It was during Wajid Ali Shah's reign that Lucknow Gharana of Kathak emerged. The Lucknow style of Kathak is characterized by graceful movements, elegance, natural poise, and focus on abhinay, that is, expressions. Wajid Ali Shah made Kathak the official court dance and also popularized it among the people. He also contributed to the literature. The famous poet Mirza Ghalib received gracious patronage from Wajid Ali Shah. Wajid Ali Shah himself was a prolific writer utilizing a simple language that conveyed meaning to all, often incorporating Awadhi, that is, the local dialect of the Lucknow. His most significant work, that is Sawat ul Kalub, comprises a collection of around 45,000 couplets. Among his notable work, the autobiographical Huzn-e Akhtar holds great importance. It portrays the unfavorable and unceremonious treatment he faced at the hands of the British authorities. Another significant work by Wajid Ali Shah is Bani. It serves as a treatise of music and dance, offering insight into the mushairas, that is, poetic gathering held at Matia Burj, located in Calcutta. So that's all for today. Stay tuned for more such updates.